power habits are things that take 5 minutes a day or less, but they actually start to rewire those patterns.
Hmm.
So for example, if you struggle with perfectionism, one of the power habits we give clients is something called 80% perfection, where you pick something once per day and you identify before you do it. Okay, what's the version I would normally do? Because that's a 100% version. What's the 80% version? Okay, this is that. I'm going to do that instead. And power habits usually feel uncomfortable. Like it's like, oh, I'm doing this, but I'm doing it anyways. But like they're so incredibly powerful.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Sleep Like a Boss podcast. My name is Annika Carroll. I'm your host, and I'm super excited to talk to Maya Sharfi today. She is an executive coach, leadership coach for women specifically. And this is a topic that is really near and dear to my heart, not just because of my 15 years in human resources, but because of my burnout. And I see women struggling in that transition from a leadership role to a bigger role so many times, and work being such a stressor with that. And I would love to talk to Maya today about all of this and what we can do to still exceed without ending up where I ended up, basically on the couch, not being able to function. So, Maya, welcome to the show.
Hi, I am so excited to be here.
So happy to have you. Before we go into the topic, do you want to give us a little bit of background on your story, what you're doing, why you're doing it?
Sure, yeah. So as Annika mentioned, I'm a executive and leadership coach and a career coach as well. And my specialty is helping women rise into senior leadership roles and then actually thrive there sustainably in ways that work for their lives. And also, and we're going to talk about this, I'm sure, work for the kind of impact that they're trying to create. Because I think a lot of the time we think that we have to work more to get more, but something funny shifts around when we move into the upper echelons of leadership where it's counterintuitive. More actually sometimes translates into less outcome. And so, like more work, more grind. And so I would say that what brought me to this was that, well, I would say that I've always had a passion on helping women discover what their unique strengths and abilities are. And I just have this my mom is a social worker and a therapist, and I almost feel like I got some of her skills, which is like, I feel like I walk around the world with like a Terminator lens on my head and like analyzing, like, oh, this person has a gift on this, or like, wow, that's a way that they show up really powerfully. And I love to help women kind of find what that is for them and then actually get to express it in the world. But the other thing that I am very, very good at is is understanding where we have beliefs that hold us back and keep us like even sometimes creating more work or more obstacles for ourselves or not achieving the lives that we want or the impacts that we want. And I think that does come from my mom. It's like an inner like limiting belief, like ding ding ding. Oh, there's one. And it doesn't mean that I don't have my own limiting beliefs, right? That I'm not aware of. And I have definitely struggled a lot with two patterns, but that I'm sure we'll talk about perfectionism and overproving that led me for years to be like working late nights, like constantly feeling not enough. And so, yeah, it's kind of a magical thing that I get to do what I do and, just like, yeah, get to help women express their potential and make sure that they're not making it harder on themselves.
Oh yeah, and I think this is coming from the full-on recovering and still on the journey perfectionist, right? There's a reason I had burnout. Um, is it's so needed, I think. And it is so, if you see women going through that, they'll do so immensely well in those senior leadership roles. They're such role models for the women below, right? And if they have a little bit of that actual people leadership skill, which I'm hoping they have, so they have been selected to go into those roles, um, they can create beautiful organizations, I think, and be mentors, wonderful mentors for younger women.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, there is such an opportunity to make such immense change, right? So much is possible in the world, right? I sometimes stop and I think about this and I think like 100 years ago, I mean, I probably I probably wouldn't have even had my own bank account. Like this is so incredible. And I was looking at a job description from Chief, the company that like they do basically like executive coaching circles, right? Like bring women leaders together. And one of their policies is I think they have I may be getting this slightly wrong on the details, but it's I think they have like a 4.5 day work week. And it's like they said this is how we think it should be done, right? And it's like there's just so much possibility for what can be happening in this moment, and to not give up your power, to really claim the power to be the change that you want to see and kind of make your mark at this stage in your life experience and history, right? Like the moment you happen to be alive, like, I just don't want to see anyone be held back from that.
Yeah. And what do you think? What are, from what you're seeing, what are some of the like misconceptions or struggles that women have who actually they have that vision, they want to do it, but then what are they getting wrong?
Yeah, well, so there's a whole set of things that sometimes women can get wrong, right? There's 5 sets of strategies that we almost like intellectual toolkits that we think women need to have in order to lead at the next level. They're knowing how to manage your time like an executive, knowing how to fully empower your team and grow proactive people and not create dependency. There's the skill of being influential, right? And so, how do you make change, right? One of the things we see is that women and actually probably men have underdeveloped influence toolkits and different, like they each have underdevelopment in different parts of their influence
Mhm.
toolkit because of the way we're socialized. So that's a very key component. The skill of actually being recognized for what you've accomplished, because when people know what you've accomplished and what your results are, it turns out that that's the only, McKinsey did a study, and that's the only piece of career advice that actually correlates with real career advancement that we give women. It's like, do this, do that, and that's the one that only that correlates. But I think it also correlates with getting your agenda accomplished in an organization, is making sure people know the results. And then I think you and I are going to talk about this most of our time, but the third component is the component to stop patterns that keep you overworking, playing small, not putting your ideas forward, self-limiting, pleasing other people. We call it stop perfecting, proving, and pleasing. And that for us is actually the foundational system, that the foundational shift that the women that we work with first make, because everything, all the other kind of practical skills, knowing how to calendar, right? Like knowing how to calendar, like use your time like an executive, inherent in it is being able to say no to things and set boundaries, right? Which means you have to learn how to stop over pleasing, which women tend to be socialized to do. So that's usually where I recommend to start, because anything else, any leadership tactics or strategies and all that stuff, they don't work that well if they're not on that foundation of strength and power, and the ability to kind of manage your own mind so that you're not almost like subconsciously sabotaging yourself.
Yeah, and I think, but it could be a bit tricky, right? Because it's like you're there for a reason. Like the organization puts you in a role often because of your skill set, which still tends to be, I find, often very tactical.
Yes and
Right?
no.
You were strategic, but it's not like, oh, it's often not that they're like she's the greatest people leader we have, maybe, but often I find the organizations do still go by knowledge.
Well, yes and no. So there's this, and I'm sure I have a feeling that you've probably seen this. There's this concept that I teach my clients called vacuum of vision.
Mhm.
So like a classic moment of vacuum of vision is someone's like, okay, well, what do you want to do? Well, write your job description and let's see where it goes, right? Or I have a client in this position right now. The company is reorganizing. Her role is getting changed. And there's a huge, like, there's 2 ways it could play out. Of course, there's a million ways, but there's 2 ways it could play out. The first is like she waits to get her job description and then does the job. But this is a moment of flux. And even though she's not necessarily on the executive leadership team, like we're looking at her job and we're looking at some of the challenges that she's facing. And I was like, well, it seems to me like there's an opportunity to define your job and what your job does, and then also to make recommendations, right? Like she works at a company that wants to have both social benefit and financial benefit. But one of the things she's noticing is that there are very strong incentives for financial benefit, and some of the people they hire who have come from non-mission driven fields maybe aren't necessarily wired to think about the social benefit. And I was like, so let's make recommendations of like, what's the reporting structure? Like, what should be on the performance management plan? All of this stuff is quote unquote above her pay
Mhm.
grade, right? Like, she's not supposed to be
Mhm.
weighing in on reporting structure and company policy. But like, one of the things about women is that versus men, and I mean this, it's not like we were born this way, right? Women are socialized more than men to follow the rules, listen to the teacher, follow the authority structure. Like, we actually know from studies of the classroom that teachers will reprimand girls more when they speak without raising their hand than boys do. And so what can happen is that women get into the like their fields, and they're like these amazing employees because they do things right and they please the boss and they are like proactive. Like, we're like the best A students. But then what can start to happen, especially as we grow into more senior levels where things are ambiguous, there's no one clear authority figure. You actually have to source insight from different places and then say, this is what I think, is I think that women actually oftentimes find themselves in these vacuum of vision situations. And there's such huge opportunities to skyrocket your career and your impact. And men, I think, naturally are socialized to find those opportunities,
Mhm.
right? Sheryl Sandberg talks about how whenever they were opening new divisions in her company, the men would be knocking on the door before they announced it, being like, I heard about this and here's why I would be great for it. And like the women never did because they were like, probably either they didn't know because they weren't getting mentored or let in on the same, like, behind the curtain intel, or they were like, oh, I like clearly, like, I will wait until I am asked, or there's a job
There's a
description.
job post there. I can apply for it. Yeah.
And so I think if we can, and so like if we can gain that skill and the ability to both navigate the vacuum of vision, right, break what feels like the rules, but actually is really about adding value, and then also the skills to, or like the insight to deal with like our fear around ambiguity, because it is so much more comfortable when you know the rules and you know how to please the teacher. Like, oh my gosh, we will be unstoppable.
Absolutely. And I think what you were just saying is something that like I used to see a lot, and I think you probably still do, to this women work so hard to get the opportunity to present themselves for these roles. And then they get the role. And then that's normally when I came in like as a coach for them too. And it's like, oh my God, I'm in this role now. Um, this is way bigger than I thought. What am I gonna do? I'm like kind of exhausted already because I just worked so hard to get here.
Yeah.
And now it's like the first 90 days, and my manager just told me I have 90 days to do all this, and then they're going to do like a first assessment, and then the panic kicks in, and potentially even like talking about sleep goes out the door, family relationships are being stretched to the limit. Burnout is on the horizon and is coming closer than you ever thought, while you finally have that job that you've been like looking for so long.
Yeah, yeah. And I think you and I were talking about this tendency, like the Cinderella story, or like the fairy tale story effect, where it's like you're working so hard to get the job and then you finally get it. And it's like the fairy tale story, right? Like watching Cinderella, it's like, and that's, Cinderella and the prince connect. And that's when it's like, the cursive writing, like happily ever after. And then you're like, wait a second, no, this is where the story starts. Like, what happens between the prince and her? What's their relationship like? Like, does she promulgate any any decrees across the land, right? Like, but I think so, to kind of speak about it in a less humorous way. One of the things that we do in my program is that we help people get jobs, right? Next level jobs, and we also help them get next level promotions. But one of the things that we also include in our program is that we have a whole pathway around what to do in your first 90 days. And that includes like that mindset layer, because what will oftentimes happen is that, especially if we've been going for a stretch role, we are bringing a sense of imposter syndrome. Am I enough? Right? It's almost this catch-22, because we want to be challenged in our roles, but then the challenge actually feels scary, and we worry that we're not going to be good enough. We're going to disappoint everyone, and that's the pleasing. I have clients who are afraid sometimes to go get a role because they're worried that well, if I get this and it feels and it's challenging, like what if I bring that stress home to my family and I've been there before, I'm impatient with my kids. And sometimes we'll think that the solve for that is stay in a boring role because right now is an important time for your family. I actually believe that the solve for that is to be able to clear out limiting mindset beliefs and patterns, um, pleasing, right? Worrying so much about disappointing other people, right? You can actually, that's something you can actually manage so that it doesn't prevent you from like aiming for great things, perfecting, right? It turns out that making things perfect is what feels safe when you think people are judging you or evaluating you, or but it actually oftentimes hamstrings you because it means that you're focusing on the wrong things. You're not fully empowering your team. You're not actually taking risks. And then, proving, and it's funny because we talked about how like you don't always know your own beliefs. Like I knew I was a perfecter for years, but it was this work working with women that helped me identify the pattern of proving and then realize, oh my gosh, I am totally like this is totally my like this is one of mine. But we can spend years in especially in male dominated industries, but even not just like constantly being underestimated, constantly being questioned, constantly having our authority questioned, our contributions not listened to. I was the only girl in my high school physics class, advanced physics class, and the only girl in my high school economics class, and like constantly feeling like yeah, I mean like all the messages we pick up about like what girls can and can't do and who's in what roles, that can all get inside, and it can lead to a set of patterns where we're trying so hard to prove ourselves that we're actually not focusing on the mission at hand, and then it drives massive overwork and micromanagement and all kinds of things that actually then we're not actually achieving the mission.
Absolutely, I so agree, and it so resonates with me too. Um, and I think it's really this, it just sucks up so much of your capacity, right?
Yes.
And it just puts that fear in that I think a lot of women, because most of the industries are still male dominant, especially when you look at a senior level, um, right? That's just the fact that it's like, and a lot of it's not that, and it's also not, you're coming into often into existing teams, right? You're being promoted into a role. You're the new younger kid on the block, while some people might be in these roles for a long time already and they just have it all. They're well-oiled machine often together, right? And you're that new little wheel that comes in and needs to find its spot in that whole mechanism. And I think if you have these limiting beliefs and that perfectionism mindset, it just puts so much stress on you and so creates this, like for me, it was almost always like high functioning anxiety
Mm,
kind of thing, that it was like I was anxious all the time because I wanted to do, and it's like, no, it's just if you're way more relaxed, it can just all everything flows better. Right?
yes,
Your
yes.
ideas just come out. You can connect better with people. You're not too defensive in arguments and discussions. You can just kind of navigate that whole, like you said, that whole ambiguity. I think that's the big thing often, right? Something new. And even if somebody's not on the level for senior management, if you're just having a change in your career, like, right, like let's say you're coming into a management role or like a middle management or something, it's just that change already causes a bit of stress. So yeah, if we're not putting fuel on the fire with our own beliefs and our own behaviors, that is, yeah, that's key. I totally agree.
Yeah, yeah. And it just, yeah, you think about, I think what's funny about it is it's really counterintuitive,
Mhm.
right? You think that working harder, stressing more, caring more is going to get you better outcomes. But I always think about this story. This was part of my own journey was, I coached this woman who she was in the tech industry and she had like clients that she served and also she had colleagues who did the same thing. And she did not answer emails after hours and she did not respond immediately, whereas her colleagues did. And it was so crazy. Her clients were happier with her and her performance and more satisfied with her than their colleagues were with them. And it's like what? That makes no sense. But I think if you really think about it, she was showing up as this, like there was a little bit of a power dynamic. She wasn't like, oh, anything you say, I'll do, which creates a less respect, right? Because like for me, one of the things I vet for when I hire consultants is I want to know that they can say no to me, they can, or they can at least strongly advise me on something, even employees, because I know that if you have yes people, they will just like their first preoccupation is trying to please you rather than like delivering what needs to happen. So like I had an experience when I hired someone for a web design where they like there were these choices I made, and I think it's not their fault, it was my fault. They did give me some heads up, but their orientation was to make me happy. And then there were things down the line that I found out later that I didn't realize were as big issues. And then there was like a lot of redo to do versus I want to be guided by someone who like is going to give me their perspective and like give me like real advising. I want to be like I feel safer with someone who shows up that way, right? Like, and I don't want them to be like, you're wrong, your website ideas suck, right? Like I don't want that, but like it doesn't have to be that, right? It's actually about having like a perspective, a stake, and a sense of your own, like really respecting your own perspective.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think what you were just saying, you like putting boundaries in and being able to say no. Like it's a biggie, right? For a lot of us, it's a biggie. And especially coming into, I guess it looks looking at your stakeholders, it depends on sometimes it's easier with some than it is with others, right? But going into a new role
Yes.
where I could see, yes, it is very, very important. It is actually very, very important, but you probably, correct me if I'm wrong, it's like that's a great prep step before you get into that role to understand your stakeholders and to understand how you can position yourself and what a yes can be and what a no is for you. And I think a lot of us, we don't even really know what a no really is.
Yeah, so this is actually probably, you and I have been talking a lot about the problem. And so so a couple of solutions, a couple of tips, right? Especially around boundaries. So I think generally, so let me introduce this concept of power habits that we teach my clients. Power habits are things that take 5 minutes a day or less, but they actually start to rewire those patterns.
Hmm.
So for example, if you struggle with perfectionism, one of the power habits we give clients is something called 80% perfection, where you pick something once per day and you identify before you do it. Okay, what's the version I would normally do? Because that's a 100% version. What's the 80% version? Okay, this is that. I'm going to do that instead. And power habits usually feel uncomfortable. Like it's like, oh, I'm doing this, but I'm doing it anyways. But like they're so incredibly powerful. One of them that we give clients is called the no diet, where you have to find something to say no to every day. And we had a client, like the thing about a power habit that like how does it work? Why does it work? Because you have to go find this opportunity to say no or be less perfect. And in your mind, the way you're doing it is the right way. It's normal. And so your brain doesn't notice things that are normal. And so you're forced to go find something that you think is normal and then treat it as special and then show up to it in a different way. So I think the action itself is powerful, but I think even just the noticing. So I had this client, we put her on a no diet. She had been really struggling to figure out the next level in her career. She actually was being asked by leadership, like, what do you want to do next? Like, we want to support you. We like it was like this amazing opportunity, but she was stuck. And she was stuck because she was so overwhelmed and so busy and both at work and at home. So she went on a no diet. And she realized, she was like, I didn't even realize it, but I'm volunteering for things all the time that I don't need to be, that people aren't even asking me to be doing. I am like volunteering to make like plans for other people's projects. Like, why am I doing that? And she didn't even realize it. And she also, started to realize where she was doing it at home with her partner.
Yes.
And anyway, so she came back to one of our sessions and she was like, okay, I have these ideas about what I want to do. And it was like she couldn't even, until she could clear out that mental space, she couldn't tap into her sense of desire. And, I've had so many clients do that. And clients are like, if I say no to this, there's going to be such repercussions. But then they do it. Like I had a client who, and this sounds so minor, but she had been printing out, like creating an agenda for the office meeting every week because there wasn't one. And she was like, oh, well, maybe this should be done. And then she started doing it. and it wasn't really in her job, and it was like this extra thing, and she was really, and it was on a heap of things that she was
Hmm.
very overwhelmed and busy on, and then she stopped and nobody even noticed. And it's almost like heartbreaking because it's like I've been doing this to myself, and also I've been creating more work for myself that like nobody valued. It could be argued whether it moves the needle or not, right? You can have like an active choice of does this push forward our work or my work? But like she was like, actually, didn't even matter, you know?
But and it is heartbreaking, right? But I think it's such a powerful teaching moment if you go through something like that yourself, because you start looking at everything that you do differently. If one of those happens, those moments to you, it's like, oh my God, nobody actually wanted this, right? And I think the other one you were saying, I think a lot of this, we focus often a lot on the work, but for like from an HR perspective, from my old hat that I was wearing, we don't focus about the home because
Mm,
that's not our thing, right? We're the organization, that's none of our business. And yes, we offer daycares and whatnot, and everybody can bring their kids, and we do all this. But there is so much at home, especially with what you were just saying with those tasks, also, right? Like this, and I'm just giving an example. My husband, they do Secret Santa. Like I'm full to the end of the year to there, and he's like, "Oh, I drew this person. What can I get him?" I'm like, "You know what? This year, literally, your job. Like I'm not even brainstorming with you. I don't have the capacity, and it's not my job."
yeah, 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 yeah. I don't focus on the home realm, but it's so connected to my work. And there are actually some incredible, actually, so a really incredible resource for folks. There's a book and then also a series of coaches. They're called fair play facilitators. Actually, we had a fair play. We were in a summit together, and there was a fair play facilitator, Mary Beth Ferrante. So she's actually a great person to connect with. But there's actually a process for how to identify home responsibilities and then divide them equally, and that includes or more equally, right? And that includes not just the doing, but also the mental load, like the kind of figuring out. And so one of the things that like me and my partner, I'm married to a man. We're both, I'm socialized as a woman, he's socialized as a man. We really struggle with this. Like just because I run a, like just because I run a like feminist basically coaching company does not mean that I don't have all of these challenges myself. But one of the things that we actually did that I think was really powerful recently was we started to look at what do we want our nights to look like?
Mhm.
And I was like, I want even just 40 minutes to go on a walk, to sit on the couch with a candle. And then we started to look at look, what needs to change in order for that to happen. And so it was very minor, but we just made a change. We had a cleaning service every 2 weeks. We found a cleaning service that actually like they will fold and put away your laundry because like laundry was always this big thing hanging over us and he was doing it, but then he like it was a whole thing. And it like takes a long time, And so now we have someone and they come every week. And it turns out that just we had never really shopped around. We're paying, I think, $80 more per month to have
Yeah.
not bi not bi-weekly cleaning, but weekly cleaning and having our laundry put away every week. And it's like, so there are totally, I think there's so many ways. I mean, this is a separate topic. Like you should interview either Mary Beth or Ashley Ching, who founded Sundays.com, who is she was also in the summit. She runs a virtual assistant service for, I would say mostly working parents, but also other folks. And like they have assistants who go into your life, they figure out the things that you need to figure out, like what camp should the kids go to, setting up medical appointments, all of that stuff. And they're like there's so much more opportunity.
Yeah.
And it's actually so much more affordable than most people think
Yeah.
to take that stuff off your plate than it ever
But it's so
was.
fun. This laundry, it's so fun. This laundry topic comes up in so many families. It
Yeah.
is so interesting. It's like what's one of the things that really like that gray cloud that hovers around households? Laundry. It's interesting. I find it's fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like it's like so funny that like different tasks. You know what I hate about laundry? I just hate that like as soon as you wash it, you just get more. And someone's like, "Well, aren't dishes that way?" And I was like, "Well, yes, but I'm like, you have to fold it, you have to put it away. It's like there's so many steps. It's so annoying, and it's like it's just so funny, like the different, yeah, laundry. I'm almost imagining like a hulking like laundry basket overflowed with like little devil horns being like, ah, ha, ha, ha.
Here we
I
go
got
again. Yeah.
you.
And it's fun. It's funny. It's like, was that I think that was on Mel Robbins' podcast once where she was like, you know what I really learned today that took so much pressure off me because she's a bit of a perfectionist, right? She's like, the laundry basket doesn't always have to be completely empty.
Yes. Yes. Oh
There
my
come the
God.
perfection.
Yeah.
There we are. I'm like, yes, that's always, it is my goal, but I've given, like, I'm like, I find it so nice to look at it and it's empty and the cupboards are full and everybody can wear whatever they want. But I find it's just too stressful to not to do that. So I'm not doing that anymore.
Yeah. And again, another resource, but there's this great book called Drop the Ball by Tiffany Dufu. So she talks about part of what's important to sharing housework more equitably between men and women is changing standards. So, like for me, I have everything. I have my like clothes sorted, like clothes in my closet sorted, shirts, dresses, this. I have like everything sorted in a certain way. I like them folded my Marie Kondo way, and then having someone come in to do laundry, like they're putting my pants in a different place. And at first I was like, oh no, I really have to teach them how to do it the right way. And then I was like, but do I? Right? Do I like, this comes up with partners all the time. Does the like the spoon, the spatulas have to be in the exact place you always wanted them to be? And what does it feel like to increase your tolerance for it to not be exactly as you wanted it? I mean, this is one of the main things we look at with delegation when we're
Yeah.
helping our clients empower their teams, like learning how to develop that discernment between the way I would do it versus good enough to achieve the outcome we need to achieve. Like that's a discernment one needs to
Mhm.
develop. And it feels very uncomfortable to develop it because we actually don't know the difference at first. We're like, well, of course, the way I would do it is the only way that that's why I do it that way. And sometimes it means having it done a different way and testing it and seeing what's is there a different outcome? Like I was a terrible micromanager. I had multiple assistants and it was never working. And then I finally started working with an agency and it was not working with them. And I was like, well, it doesn't feel like this is working. And they were like, well, Maya, it's because it's like you need to give Jazz, she was my assistant at the time, you need to give Jazz some time to respond. And she's going to make some mistakes and then you're going to give her some feedback. And like, and like at the time, I was doing that same thing where it was like clients need to hear back within this amount of time. And it turns out they didn't. And when we lengthened our response time, nothing happened. Everybody was fine. But it felt so high stakes to me. And then it
Yeah.
turned, and I was like, I'm running a business. And if people don't feel served, then they're not going to work with me anymore. And I'm going to like, I'm already too, I was I was doing consulting and I was like, and I'm already too young, I have my imposter syndrome. And then they're going to think that I'm not responsible. And then like all that stuff was in my own head and it was my overproving and over perfecting. And I couldn't really see that until I tested what felt like, oh, what was wrong and what was like, this is too far and what felt like a mistake. And then I realized it wasn't a mistake.
I know, and it is such a powerful experience. I remember when I was in HR, I ran a project it was insane. And the project team was like, I think I had like 50 people working with me, and I was still reporting into like a bigger project manager. And there was so many things like I couldn't do. Like I was just not, it was not happening, right? Like I would have worked 24/7 as it's like, oh man, was that hard. And some of the things, even like communication, key stakeholders. And I had a communications lady, and she was fantastic. And then she all of a sudden she was like, you're really busy. I'm like, yeah. She's like, should I go to the board meeting and hold the change management presentation myself? And I was like, oh my God, like, A, should I not be there, right? Should I not tear myself apart into, yes, these are very important stakeholders. I'm like, and then it just didn't, we had a crisis of some kind. I was like, it's just not happening. I'm like, are you comfortable? Like, okay. I was sweating, like, like, if this doesn't go well, my job, like, this is not good.
Yeah.
It was fine. They even came back. They're like, she has such a great way of explaining things nice. I'm like, awesome. Like, you're doing them all, like, off my plate. I can't, like, A, is not my favorite thing to do, and B, if I can take, but it is like that takes some, and I wouldn't have had the courage if it hadn't been the
Yeah.
moment where I was my back to the wall and I couldn't, and I just had to, I would have gone to all the meetings. I would have probably done worse than she did. Not bad, but she was just really good at that. Like that was her key competency. And yes, it just takes, I guess, the opportunity, you could even say, right, for things to come up, or somebody who can help you, like you coach you through that uncomfortableness of sitting with it and not doing it because like, just to give one more example, because I always find them quite helpful. We also, when you said like you have to let people try, right? And your assistants or somebody like let them do their thing, and then we correct as we go along if need be. Like we had a manager in the end. She would give you a task. She was very strategic with how she was working and what she wanted from you, um, concepts and blah blah blah. And then, but you saw in her face that she had the answer exactly on how she wanted it.
Mm.
And then it got to it's like, no, you have to do that better because I'm already not motivated to do it because you kind of know what you want and you, right? It's kind of this, no, then guide me in a certain way, but um, also don't let people like trial and error too much.
Yeah.
It's a fine line. And I think often that is where, especially if you come new into those roles, somebody like you who can support and just reflect, right? Because it also gets, the more senior you get, it gets lonelier and lonelier and lonelier.
Yes.
And people don't necessarily like to give, generally don't like to give honest feedback. I would say in organization, that is often the case in general. And plus, then you have even less people who you can share certain things with too, because of the level of seniority that you're at, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you raise a couple things. So I think the idea of like how much leeway to give. So I had a manager early in my career who she was really a bottleneck because she would try to prepare everything I would need to know about the task. And I can't go back in time and climb in her head, but when I see this with my clients, there's usually one of two things that are motivating them. Number one, they're worried about having to take more time later, so they're trying to get it done right now to give you all the information. Number two, they worry that if they don't give you all the information, then you're going to be like, I don't know what to do, and then they have will have failed you. So it's driven by I would say a version of perfecting, although
Mhm.
it's not classic perfecting or pleasing. And so what would happen was she was like a massive bottleneck. And of course, she still had to review my stuff and I like to teach clients to give a task, give just enough information, right, to do it, but then have, especially if you're delegating something for the first time, so you don't know what their work quality is like, and it's probably not going to be that good, right? Like, or it may not be that good. A shorter period of time where you can give feedback. And I also like really nimble, fluid feedback because then I think sometimes women prepare to give feedback because they're trying to do it the right way. And I would rather do it so much more fluidly. And so what I will do, for example, when I was training my assistant who does a lot of marketing writing and stuff for me, I would be reading the thing that she had written or put together. And I use this service called Loom, which is
Mhm.
a screen recording service. And so I will have it on and I will hit play and I will say my feedback and I'll pause it and I'll keep reading it and editing it. And then I'll turn it back on to be like, and here I'm editing this for this. And then I can start to articulate the why versus, some like it's actually hard to articulate why you think something doesn't work. But most people in a conversation or a work process can actually do that. So it feels like you're basically working and then sharing about what you're doing and then you're pausing and playing so you end up with like a I don't know like a 3 or 4 minute video that they can watch on 2 times speed and then that process of giving feedback is fluid. So sometimes I'd be writing it, I'd be like, I'd change something and I'd like I'd say I've changed this because thing is this word choice is kind of weird, I would never really say that. And then as I'll be talking I'll be like, oh, but you know what, honestly it doesn't really, I guess I'd never really say that, but does it matter if I would have, like, is this one of the things that really matters? Actually, probably not, right? And then I'll either just say that and I'll say, okay, so never mind, so don't change that, and then I'll keep going, and like, so it allows it, it's a process that both allows you to more fluidly give feedback, but it allows you to become a better manager and
Yeah.
feedback giver versus like set up a meeting. I have to like get all my ideas about what doesn't work. And there's a lot of ambiguity there because I don't really know why it doesn't work. And I have to kind of identify that in an abstract way versus in an immersed way.
Mhm. Absolutely. So, what do you think in general, women who are trying to get into these roles and they're doing a lot, they have a lot on their plate. What's your what are your top two, three things where you'd say either do this or avoid that to be successful in that new role?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is start a power habit. Stop over perfecting, over proving, over pleasing because it doesn't make you look like a senior leader in addition to the fact that it's not sustainable, right? So like pick one of the power habits that I shared today and practice it. I would say the second thing is get really clear on where you want to go next. There's so much ambiguity. Like I said, I work with women who are trying to get jobs. I work with women who are like maybe they got laid off or maybe they can tell like they're like tapped out in their organization or they realize that their organization isn't in alignment with their values or they can't reach the salary they want. So they're looking for a new job or they're looking, to get promoted and they're getting stuck. The place most people do get stuck is they're not really clear on the role that they want. So we have a step called identify your right role where we help like, but basically what you should do is you should identify the role in the industry because then when you're networking with people, which is the best way to get senior level jobs, right? You should apply for jobs, but you'd also, most of my clients, I would say, or I would say a very large percentage of my clients get jobs and next level roles through networking. Like you need to be able to speak to it in a way that someone can be like, oh, I know this person. Oh,
Mhm.
da da da. Like I have clients who have jobs created for them in conversations all the time. And if you're not crystal clear on what you can do, like like if you've ever been in months of networking conversations, then and they're not working, then that's why. And then I would say that well, I think that's actually probably those two steps. If you start with those steps, then that's the way to start and go and get momentum.
Awesome. Yes. Yes. And yeah, I think those are really powerful and really doable because I think the power habits alone give you capacity to answer that question, that second one, right? Because you might need to be a bit creative there and rethink things and wish and also be brave a little, right? And I think sometimes that's where somebody like you, like a coach who would actually, it's like, I would like this, but I don't see it anywhere. But I think it's needed. Yeah, you've probably identified something that is very much needed based on your experience. You just need to find the organization or the person who is willing to be as bold as you are and take that step with you and say, yes, it actually, I see it too in my organization, or you have a good point. Let's make it happen, right?
Yeah, and I would say sometimes it's about finding the match in the organization. So we had a client who was continually the second, like the runner-up candidate for she was going after a certain C-suite roles, and she was constantly the second, like the runner-up. And we identified that she wasn't speaking from a results-driven place, right? People didn't know
Mhm.
about, she wasn't speaking about the right accomplishments to make the match. And so she wasn't looking results-driven enough. But the other thing that was the missing factor was she had some family stories, I would say like mindset work to do around the kinds of companies she thought she was supposed to excel in. And they were
Mhm.
very traditional. They were very,
Mhm.
like, she was like a very innovative, interesting thinker. She wanted to break down, like, she didn't even want to break down silos. She just wanted to solve the business problem. And that required breaking down silos and, working across departments. But there was an image of the kind of company that she thought she was like,
Mhm.
this is what success looks like. And so when we finally got clear on these are some of the factors in a company that will value your leadership style, which is more innovative, all of a sudden she had like three potential job offers. And, now she's in a role where basically the CEO is like, we want you to come change this aspect. And she's got like their full support. And so sometimes it is the culture, and so you want to be able, especially in more senior roles, to find that culture match and, even having the right questions. Because if you're like, are you guys innovative? Everyone will be like, well, of course we are. But
Yeah.
then tell me about the last change
Yeah.
initiative that you had and what did it look like and who was involved and how did it roll out and was it successful, right? Like these are not first interview questions. These are
No.
like third, like it's just like, how many kids do you want to have is not always a first date question. So, but sometimes it's also about finding a place that is the right place. It is a place where there's enough match and then like where you believe that there's enough potentiality to make your change, and then you don't have to make your full change, right? You don't have to be like 4.5 workday or bust, right? Like to use that example, there's so many other ways that people want to make an impact and like see their values played out. But like it could be that like this is a minor but example, but I was working with a company as a consultant. I was bringing one of my programs and they had always, like, you as a HR professional, you will totally get this. For programs, they had always been like, well, the leaders nominate the people to participate. And I have a belief that everybody has potential. Sometimes that potential gets overlooked, that anyone in any moment in their lives can raise their hand and say, I want more. And any skill, capacity, way of thinking can be built. And even the skill of like grit and persistence, like, can be built. And so I was just thinking, we're going to have like I have a value that I don't want the only people who get to participate to be the people that the leaders
Yes.
see already, choose, sometimes are shaped like, patterned
Yep.
like the leaders. And so I was like, well, can we have people nominate themselves? And they were initially resistant because they'd never done that before and it wasn't how things were done. I was like, well, what if we have leader nomination and a self-nomination track, and then maybe, and they ultimately decided that they wanted leader approval and self-nomination, just because if people do have performance management issues, they don't want that, like, and I
Yep.
get that, right? I get that. But it was I mean, it was like amazing because number one, we totally changed what is actually a very significant policy, even though it seems so minor. And like we had multiple people participating who like were able to find their own way into growth when they maybe had been overlooked or hadn't known how to not be overlooked. And like that changed like the trajectory of people's
Yes.
careers. Like it's so, and it's
Absolutely.
it's like it's just so minor, but it's so powerful, you know?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing all these stories. It's just, I love it. It's my old HR heart always opens. And yes, it's um and I think it is just so powerful to take that time. I would say even regardless of where you're at in the organization, take that time and reflect on all those things that you've been talking about. Like, right, even if I'm making a change in my career, where am I? Or would it be smart to have somebody do that with me? What are my values? Where am I at? What are my limiting beliefs? Where am I self-sabotaging? Um, I might have the potential for more. And if I feel that and I want that role, how do I get there? Right? It's really, there's so much possibility out there. Um, and you do actually have something that you wanted to share with the audience,
I do. I
which I
do.
think would be super helpful when it comes to that whole discussion that we were just having.
Yeah. So we've got a quiz that will help you understand what is the next obstacle between you and the next level role that you want, right? Because if you can identify what's the specific thing that I need to do next in order to get there, it doesn't feel like such an overwhelming, like I want to grow, but I keep asking for this promotion. It's not going anywhere, right? Like I'm trying to find my next thing, but I just keep applying for things and they're like on LinkedIn and it's like there are 374 other applicants. And so this will actually help you identify the specific next thing that you need to shift in order to get your next level role. So you can access it at buildyourselfworkshop.com/quiz. It's probably about a 3-minute quiz and it's super powerful to identify what your next right step is in order to land that level up role.
Awesome. Awesome. And yeah, I really encourage everybody to go do that if that is something that you really want to, that's on your agenda, that you want to make that change. And yeah, quizzes are always fun for sure. And I will link in the show notes everything so everybody has the link. Just go up there and click it and do the quiz. And is there anything else that you wanted to share?
No, I'm just thankful to be here. I love the work you do. I think both you and we really care about people and their potential and the idea that you can meet your potential without like sacrificing what life feels like. And so I just think it's so powerful, what you do. And I'm really happy to be here. And thank you anyone who listened in and yeah, I believe in you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom and your stories with us. And everybody, you can also, you have the website with the quiz, but I'll put more of Maya's contacts. So if you would like to reach out and get Maya's help, please do that. And thank you everybody for listening and watching. And I'm looking forward to seeing everybody in the next episode.